Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first session of the Tezos speaker series. I'm Johnny Dean Mann. I'm a writer and artist, but I also publish, I'm the editor of the Tickle, the first, as far as I know, NFT magazine. We've featured Disc Collective. I don't know whether you can see them on the wall yet. No. Disc Collective and Avona Town. We're shortly to feature Tyler Boswell too. I won't talk too much today. I'll let the artists do most of that. So on to introductions then. Avona, would you like to start? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much all for coming here. I'm Ivana Tao. I'm an AI artist, mixing photography, code, machine learning, a lot of different stuff lately. So I'm really working on the intersection of various new media. And yeah, my goal is really to connect the human and the machine element.
And Tyler.
Hi, my name is Tyler Basel. I'm a web developer by day and creative coder from Las Vegas, Nevada. Pretty new to generative art. I only started getting into it last year. But it's been a lot of fun using my technical code background and sort of being able to finally express myself artistically. So yeah, excited to be here.
Thank you, Tyler. And we're also joined by Disc Collective from Istanbul, I believe. Disc Collective, over to you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. We're really happy to join you from Istanbul. My name is Bilge, and I am an artist and co-founder of Disc Collective. I've actually met with generative art and creative coding like almost 2 years ago. And before that, I was actually working as an artist manager in music business, music industry. So I was actually wanted to focus on looking for like alternative models as a business model for artists, especially the ones that are producing their works digitally. And I wanted to focus on producing works digitally, distributing them digitally, and sharing them digitally. So that's how I met with NFTs, blockchain, and Web3. And we decided with Ilgan to, I didn't mention, but I was actually doing my audio and visual works as a hobby when I was working as a manager. So we decided to share our works as NFTs and through Disc Collective. So that's how we found Disc Collective.
And I'm Ilgan. I'm actually an electroacoustic music composer. And as Bilge, it's been 2 years that I met with creative coding and with generative art, because like I was in a search for creating more organic sounding elements in the music. So I started programming my music. Then I met with processing, and here we are.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us from Istanbul. So the title of the speaker series is Performance in Code, and generative art has a performative, interactive kind of nature to it, participatory as well. Particularly with this exhibition where visitors can mint their own artwork. I'd just like to go to each artist in turn to ask their thoughts about how you position yourselves as artists within this dynamic, and maybe also talk to us about the individual projects that you're showcasing in the booth. Ivona first.
Yeah, so my project is called Whispers and Code, so it's a direct allusion to the title, Performance and Code. And it's also something that is very different from my previous projects, because I go into performance aspect here in a very strong way, trying to engage viewers, mentors, anyone really interested to play with the work. And through the reversal of AI role, usually when we hear the term AI art, we think of, well, AI is our tool. We tell AI draw me a picture of a cat in a rocket ship. But here I just decided to reverse the role and also show that AI can be used in a creative process in a very different way. So here AI makes the decisions. And those decisions are not performed by AI, but you, a viewer, can do something else. So this is where performative aspect comes into play, also through conversation with all generative projects such as, or conceptual projects such as Sol LeWitt, for example, whose instructions were to be performed by people. Here people are performing the instructions, but also they can disobey the machine. We're different from the machines in such a way that we have free will, but when we are training neural networks, they don't have any choice. They just optimize the loss function forever, and this is where this kind of conversation between what is human, what is mechanical, comes into play. So really invite everyone to try to play it out and in this iterative manner to do the things machine tells you to do and then ask it to evaluate. So machine will come back to you and evaluate and give you another set of instructions. So really try to go into performance this way.
There's also quite a strong literary element in your piece. It's almost like generative poetry. Can you tell me sort of what you were trying to achieve with the language element in this piece?
Yes, that is correct. So I believe I'm really impressed by artists using literal texts and poetry within the visual language. So those mediums of communication are somewhat different, but I just love to combine those and trying to find also intersections of what cannot be expressed with words and what cannot be expressed with visual language. This is one of goals that I just love to explore in my work. So here again, this text element was something that I really wanted to incorporate within the work, even in such a simple way, by just showing the instructions and trying to make it part of the minted work.
And Tyler, could you perhaps give your thoughts on that and describe your project as well?
Sure. My project is called Stepping Stones. Kind of the idea behind it is that you have all these small, very simple pieces, and you're arranging them and putting them in different colors and ways to make them all either very simple or very complex outputs. So I'm taking these very basic cube-looking shapes and applying these basic patterns to them, and then doing lots of distortion to them to blend them and mix them all together. So you've got some outputs that are very simple and not much going on with them, honestly. And then you've got these really chaotic outputs as well. So I think it's fun to see, and the rarity and features of this project, they don't have a ton of meaning, honestly. It's really up to which ones you like, because some people like those really simple ones that are, one of the features is like called Zen, like everything just matches, it's very peaceful in a way, but then you have other ones that are crazy, and like party time is one of the features. So yeah, it really, I'm kind of leaving it up to whoever likes what outputs they like, and making it not just based on a rare feature that is seen as more valuable just because it has a feature. I really want people to look through the outputs and see what speaks to them.
Reading some of the materials on your website, you mention several occasions where you kind of make mistakes, perhaps in the code, or something untoward happens that you weren't expecting, and you had learned to embrace that. And I guess this kind of touches on that role of the generative artist as a curator, essentially, of their own kind of creations. I just wonder if you could perhaps talk to us a little bit about your thoughts about your input into that process.
Yeah, what's very different about generative art is that you're not working on just one piece, one output. You're kind of working on more of like a feeling of what you want to express. So each time I'm making a change to the code, I'm seeing a different output. And after seeing hundreds of these, you kind of get the feeling, oh, I don't like that these are maybe too chaotic, and you sort of tone that down, or now it's getting too simple, you have to crank that back up. So yeah, in a weird way, you're kind of curating a series of potential pieces. You're not working on a specific artwork where you're making tiny little detail changes. So I kind of see generative art as yes, artists, because they're building these algorithms from scratch, but then at a certain point you kind of turn into a curator and decide what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of, things like that.
Thanks, Tyler. This collective then, onto your project in the Tezos booth. Could you tell us a little bit about that and perhaps something about the nature of the performative, interactive aspect?
Yeah. Udne is actually a series of asymmetrical textural compositions that I really love to call them, because it's the main idea behind the Udne is just using 3 elements and limiting myself with just using that three mathematical equations, or I might say particle drawing systems with just 3 colors. To create some kind of organic looking and abstract compositions, which I really love to think long form as a musical term, as like a musical form. So long form for me is like an album, or like I might say maybe a very long song form, like 3-part song form. So Udne is like that. Every iteration is a song. Every particle drawing system is a musical motifs. So combining with 3 motifs, I'm creating songs, and these songs, like all of them, all serves the same narrative that we have in the whole collection, but they all kind of different from each other, but still telling us the same story. I think generative arts, especially long-form generative arts, enabled me to tell a very larger stories than just a single created output. So, if you want to add something, or
I think, yeah, we can also talk about what we are thinking about when we are exploring these textures within the collection. So for us, since we started doing long form like a year ago, and on the Fixash, we started working on again like 3 particle painting systems with 3 colors, and to explore these textures. This time in Udne, we actually, Ilgun was working on a new technique. I can call it technique, like watercolor. So we wanted to merge these 2 drawings with like having and merged texture, I would say. So the idea was that behind Udne is having, so for example, we thought this in a macro and micro level, that these textures that we can see in our everyday life. So let's say, imagine a wall that there's like lots of artworks on it, on the public, and it's been there, these artworks, it's graffitis and posters and everything was there for so long. And let's imagine that the wall has 2 that it's rains on it, and it actually like creates another layer of texture. That's what we are trying to explore on Udne, like let's say in a micro level, and or we can also think about this as like as a landscape and on a sunset, and there's this foggy atmosphere, and the light emits, the fog emits the light, and then you see this blurry, foggy atmosphere, but this air pollution is still there, and it's kind of like it creates another texture in as an idea. So that's what we are trying to explore within Udne.
Thank you, guys. You mentioned that your inspiration or your kind of aim with your generative artworks, particularly the long form ones, is this sort of search for an organic representation, some kind of organic elements. Could you sort of tell us about the inspiration for that particular aesthetic choice?
Mm-hmm. Like for me, when I started coding, as I said, I started coding with audio. So I was like programming the audio because like I wanted to create like digitally like digital sounds with an organic feel to it. So so I discovered using code as a medium in music and in visuals too enabled me to push forward the like I have a texture in my mind that I want to do, and it's a very digitally looking texture. Maybe I might say like a polished one. So when I try to do visual stuff without coding, I always end up with that polished digital texture. But when I started coding, the nature of like the how you say freeness, like özgürlük, help me.
Freedom.
Yeah, the freedom that coding gives to you is kind of very, I may say, easy way to find organic feel because of the randomness, or because of not just randomness, but the main element is randomness, and my input is like is more real than other stuff. Okay, yeah, my brain stopped a bit. Sorry about it, but
it's almost midnight, so okay, we get a little bit sleepy, I guess.
Thank you for joining us so late. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
You mentioned story earlier, that the longer form projects allow you to sort of tell stories. Would you say that you're trying to be storytellers with these pieces? What's your kind of general sort of aim with these works?
Actually, we started in our previous work in Solitude. We started to try to tell the story with Solitude. Then Udne is our actual second collection, which is not just having a long form as like a form. As I said, it's just with a storytelling aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you are the storyteller, so you can.
The thing is that it's not like we're trying to have the collection has an overall story, but for us, as Ilgin mentioned, that we're thinking this as like an album. So as an album, it's like it would have like several tracks, and they would just one by one they would probably tell some stories in it. So we are trying to find abstract textures, but in the end, when we are working at home in our home studio together, we end up finally like looking at kind of sceneries, and that's what we are trying to actually talk about it. But it's the whole collection doesn't have to be tell the whole story, but it's what comes from us. So yeah.
Thanks, guys. I guess one of the questions I always ask generative artists in my work for the magazine that I create is one that frustrates a lot of them, because they've probably been asked it several times in their careers so far. But it's a pertinent one, I think, for people who are not so au fait with generative art, NFTs, digital art, perhaps. And the question is, where do you think, and this is a question for all of our panelists, where do you think the art resides in the generative process? Is it more in the sort of code base that then generates the art, or is it in the final pieces itself, or some extra meta level to that? I don't know who wants to go first. Maybe Tyler this time, perhaps?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's different for the artist and collectors what the actual art is. Because for me, I'm seeing thousands and thousands of outputs when I'm working on a project. And by the time I'm ready to publish, that I'm done. Like, that's what I've made. But for everyone else, they're just seeing the final set of outputs that are created, and that's the art to them. They haven't seen all of those 1,000 previous test outputs. So yeah, I think it is very different. To me, I will see the ones that come out at the end, but I know that there are so many others that are similar or very different that never get seen. But there is that kind of wall between artist and collector that they don't really get to peek and see over the wall and see all those what could have been outputs. I do like keeping, on FXhash specifically, the variations enabled even after minting is done, just so people can go back and see, you know, yeah, they weren't part of that collection officially, but just to see what else that code could have made.
Has your interaction with collectors since you began your journey in FXhash changed your approach or your thinking at all about this?
Yeah, 100%. Because when I was posting things I was working on last year, end of last year, I think I had maybe 50 Twitter followers, just throwing it out there into the ether, just whatever I was working on. But now when I post something, people are like, oh, when's that going to be minted and on FXhash? And it's a very different feeling. So I try not to post anything until it's close to ready. But I do like to interact with everyone who enjoys my work, enjoys other FXhash artists' work. I think it's a lot of fun just being part of that community, and it's very tight-knit, which is a lot of fun, but tight-knit, but also very welcoming. There's always new artists and collectors coming in.
I'll potentially come back to you about that notion of transparency in the work-in-progress process. But perhaps, Sivona, if you could answer the same question about where the art is.
Yeah, of course. This is a very fascinating question, I find, and it also relates to the question of authorship, I guess, because who says what art is? Perhaps the author would be the best entity to answer the question, and with my work, I also try to blur the lines, so there you no longer know who the author is, so even more difficult is to answer what the art is here. Is it idea, this intangible concept? Is it the minted piece? Is it the piece that has seen the interaction of viewer who draws on top of the work with various brushes? And the lines are blurred on purpose, and this is why I want to kind of had this reflection in viewers to think what would they consider art, and who would they consider author, and those questions don't have answers, so I don't have an answer either. But I just would love to kind of everyone have a thought about it. And I believe that this is also something that, for me as an artist, was quite challenging when I started to work with long-form generative art, as I really love to have the control over the process. I work with those powerful neural networks that just do whatever you want them to do. So kind of you want to guide them, and you want to design everything and to choose the created outputs, to choose the directions. But of course, when you work with algorithms, you don't have this complete control, and you just design the boundaries, you just design kind of the process, but it can go out of control very easily, and you don't want that. Maybe sometimes you want that. You also like to be surprised by your own works. So this is a very new relationship to kind of creating, and it's also very, I would say, it gives a lot of freedom and makes you change the way you see your own work. So it's just fascinating to play with those concepts in your own practice.
I guess with all long-form generative art projects, you're sort of throwing that out there to the collectors to then kind of create their own piece of the work. But there seems to be an added sort of sense of participation in this event, particularly in the fact that the live audience is coming to interact with it and to mint the pieces, which I hope all of you have done or will do during the weekend. Do you think that kind of extra element of participation sort of brings something extra? Did it change the way you thought about the piece as you were creating it, perhaps?
Yes, so I would say that one of the aspects that is the most rewarding for me as an artist is to see people live react to my works. And also it's one of my goals to evoke emotions within viewers. So when I'm just around at some exhibition, especially incognito, and hear people talk about the works and hear what they remind them of, is something that is the most rewarding for me as an artist. And I believe that this being present with the works, and especially seeing them created on the spot, minted and already owned by the viewer, makes them a special experience to the people collecting, but to artists as well. So for everyone, it's this experience that also becomes a performance in a way. It has this element of surprise, but it also has this element of human interaction and conversation, either with an artist or with other folks attending. Even the way how participants here can interact with the collection, but also having in mind their own piece. Where does the rarity score put their own piece with the full distribution? It makes them feel perhaps be part of something.
Disc Collective, the same question to you guys. I guess your mention of this concept of several pieces working together as an album, as a concept, maybe affects the way you answer this question, but over to you.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about finding the right balance, in the whole collection, like finding the right balance between the layers of probabilities and between the between the iterations and between the chaos, and maybe sometimes it will be more controlled and more without control. Testing and finding the right balance is I see where the art is in generative art.
And I think it's like as a duo, sometimes it gets hard because it's like we test like so many outputs, and then we share our thoughts about it, and then sometimes we think, do we have too much control over the overall algorithm or not, or do we like what we see? And it's like sometimes it feels like you can't make enough decisions to about it, because you end up sometimes getting surprise outputs which are really good or not, and it doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's a very difficult question actually.
And for us specifically, it's about finding the balance between us two, because we always struggle about it, and but it's a nice kind of a dynamic added to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, you've just taken my next question actually, because we've been talking about the relationship with human and machine, and obviously with the added element of the audience or the collector in generative art. But obviously, you work as a collaboration yourselves, as a collective, as a duo. Can you talk to us a little bit about that extra kind of how that extra dimension of collaboration works for you guys?
For me, it was very hard actually, because like for me, like going like learning how to letting it go with the algorithm was very hard. And there's another level with us, like I should sometimes let go some of my ideas because like she has a different vision, and most of the time she's right about them, and I'm very stubborn, and I was very control freak. So this dynamic, especially generative art algorithms and like being a duo, like taught me to find the right, again I would say balance between letting it go and controlling everything. I think it's yeah.
Well, I can say that it's like we also do music together, so we're kind of used to working together for a long time. The thing is that I don't very feel comfortable as much as Ilgun do in terms of creative coding. So especially for long forms, Ilgun usually has the artistic idea that he would implement it with the algorithm, and then he makes sure that it works. Then I would jump in, and then we would start working on the compositions, color palette selections, and the overall algorithm, the meaning, the story behind the algorithm, etc.
Thanks, guys. Just to let everyone know here, we will be taking questions at the end of this session, so if you have anything you wanted to ask any of our artists, then you'll get a chance at the end. I have a few more questions for you guys, though, before we do that. And Ivona, I guess for you first, your work is a unique combination of your AI work. You're a PhD in AI, and you're also a photographer. And also now you're working with generative systems. So it's quite for me, it's a unique combination. And I just wondered if you could speak to us about how you mold all these different kind of medium into what you produce.
Yeah, I have many hats, and sometimes I feel like I have many personalities. So in one way, it's challenging, but it's also fascinating, because I believe that those different aspects of being photographer on one hand, being AI researcher on the other, helps me to see both areas or all of the areas through a set of different lenses. And it also helps sometimes to notice things that, well, photographers maybe would not notice, the potentials of photography within the usage of photography and code, and the other way around, of having kind of like structure within the creative process that's coming from AI research, and also exploring the models on a deeper level and trying to gain a deeper understanding of how artificial intelligence works. So I believe that those different aspects really help me with the discovery process and going on explorations. And this is what I really like to do most in my work. It's when I call myself AI artist, I like to explore the areas of using AI in a way that no one's doing. I'm not interested in doing the same thing everyone's doing. I'm just thinking, how can I do this differently? And it goes the same for photography. I just don't want to do travel photography or concert photography no longer, but I want to train AI on my photography. And this kind of way of making photography when training models on top is also very different, because you have to learn to look at images the way machine does. So really generalizing concepts in a very different way. So I believe that in my case, it kind of goes perfectly together to create this kind of person who I am in a very weird way. But yeah, it's just what are the elements combining my kind of personality.
This may be reductive, but in terms of your overall kind of artistic journey, which came first? Would you consider yourself a photographer initially, or a coder initially, or researcher? What sort of timeline?
Yeah, I kind of thought of those as separate concepts. I always thought I had like this split personality, photographer on weekends, serious researcher on weekdays. So now all those personalities came together very, very happily. But I believe it comes from me being actually from a mixed background as well. My mother's Polish, my father's Lithuanian, so I was always learning two languages at the same time, learning two cultures at the same time, and it also came to the fact that I was fascinated by art since young age, but also numbers since a young age. So yeah, it kind of came together at the same time.
Thanks, Sabrina. And Tyler, going back to that notion we were talking about sharing your work in progress, I think on one of your projects, write-ups for your Tender project, which was called Love, I think, you said you're usually hesitant to share work in progress. And I just wondered, for me, it seems like you're one of the most transparent artists in terms of your progress, work in progress. Yeah, and I just wondered sort of what your thoughts were on that, and if there is any kind of interaction with collectors or with followers on social media, for example, that shapes the project before it becomes something available to mint.
Yeah, it's something I noticed because I was originally just posting everything online, and then people kind of came to expect whatever I was posting to be like a final result of a project. And I kind of felt like I was trapped in that specific look or outcome. Like when the project is finished, that should be a possible outcome. But sometimes it's early on and I want to completely redo something and make it totally crazy or different. And I feel like I would let those people down if I changed it dramatically in a way. So yeah, I've come to kind of save posting my pictures and works in progress until I'm basically done and happy with those results. Because yeah, don't want to make anyone unhappy.
That's an interesting idea that you're sort of fearful of making collectors or people who mint these works unhappy. Is that a tension that you feel regularly? I guess that this question could go to everyone as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just... I'm not trying to necessarily cater to specific collectors, like, oh, I'm going to make a piece that looks like this to make people want to buy it. That's not my goal necessarily. But yeah, I want to make sure the expectations are like clear of what it will be in the end.
And I guess final question for Dist before we open to questions from the audience for the last 10 minutes. You mentioned this concept of the album. Do you have a sort of album completion date in mind? Is that something that you're working on to those larger scales?
Well, actually, Udne is kind of an album completion for us because, like before Udne, we had collection in terms of edition size, like 150 or it was maximum 300. So for Udne is like has a 800 edition size. So thinking Udne for me especially, like we have a kind of a three different placements, I might say, in if anyone see the results, you might notice the particle system starting from horizontal and vertical and circular. So we actually there are three albums, little albums, like three singles, EPs, okay, and they are forming an like a completion album for now, and maybe more in the future, because I really love these concepts of thinking as a musical form in long form. It really worked for me, so I really enjoyed it. So I want to explore it furthermore. So yeah.
But you also asked for the music, right? That was, yeah, but we're not doing that right now. Yeah, not in the short term.
I quit being a composer when I started.
Generative.
It's like as Ivana said, I still, it's like a other personality of me. I still couldn't find any time to compose. I really miss, but I will. Maybe a joint one, maybe an audiovisual long form. Yeah, we will see. Yeah.
So yeah, I highly recommend, if you haven't already seen these 3 projects in the Tezos booth, just back there, to go and check them out and mint your own artworks. We have just over 5 minutes for questions from the audience for our artists. If anyone would like to ask a question, now is your chance. I think we have a gentleman at the back here with the microphone, so if you raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll get to you.
Beautiful. Hey, my name is Lex. I am a collector and developer on Tezos. Thank you for this presentation. Thank you for the art and the innovation. My question is something I'm getting a lot of reactions from collectors as well as how do you use AI? AI gives you this ability to generate large quantities of art. There's a lot of options. How do you keep that journey? How do you kind of juggle the possibilities of AI and the amount of art that can create, and then the handmade kind of non-AI as opposed to the for collecting? Because when you look for artists who really want what they make, there are not as much decisions of the AI and how they make this. Kind of tell us about that process.
Yeah, of course. So, well, it definitely helps to use different kinds of AI. So there's a common misconception that there is just like this magical AI that does things, but, well, AI is just an umbrella term for so many different models, and I like to use different kinds of models. So I use a lot of GANs, but also here I'm using just plain CNNs for classification. So there's just a myriad of ways to use that, but I still believe that the success of AI project lies in the human element. So I always try to incorporate something personal within, whether it's personal memories encompassed in the photography, and then you get this very unique feeling, which kind of becomes your unique personal style, or add code elements. So on FXH collections, I actually combine the kind of traditional procedural generative art making. I think AI disagrees. Yeah, but yeah, there's just a lot of ways to make that personal.
Just set the world on fire.
Not quite sure what's going on there. Anyone else have any questions for our panelists? I think we have someone over here. We're coming to you.
Hi, my name is Ryan, and I just had a quick question about like your creative signature, your mark on what identifies you as an artist. I mean, when we walk out here at the fair, we look at a lot of different like painters, for example, who have like a brush or a technique that they tend to follow. And I'm questioning in digital art and creative coding and AI art, what is it that you tend to see your signature? Is it something that lies in like the data set for the AI artwork, or is it something that's lying within the creative coding side that maybe we don't see as the visual representation that's on the screen?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. I guess we'd go to everyone in turn on that one. Disc Collective, would you like to address that initially?
Yep. For me, I think using textures and using particle systems and maybe muted colors.
Yes, muted colors.
Yeah, we might say these are kind of a signature thing.
organic-looking abstract textures, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say it's more of a visual aesthetic signature for you guys rather than sort of code-based?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to explore, and yeah.
And Tyler, I guess to you next.
Yeah, for me, it's also, I think, a visual similarities between all my projects. When I was just starting, I was using very basic shapes, circles, squares, things like that. But that's kind of just what I've stuck with, and just combining them in more complicated ways as I've moved forward. So pretty much all of my projects, you can break them down to those basic geometric shapes being combined in various ways and more complicated ways over time. And maybe that aesthetic will change in the future, but that's, I would say, is kind of my the trend throughout my work so far.
And Ivona?
Yeah, for me, so it really started with visual aesthetic and being drawn to dark colors and particular colors who are reminiscent of analog photography. So this is something that was there very strong in my, let's say, first project that I did. But the more I grow as an artist, the more I like to go out of my comfort zone. And I would say that now it becomes a common ground for themes that I explore. So it's very much related to memories, emotions, humanity, and what makes us, what makes our consciousness, what makes our personalities, and to have this kind of exploration within those themes. I still like to go outside of those, but I'm still drawn to particular visual aesthetics as well. So, but it's not as bounded as before, I would say.
Thanks, guys. I probably have time for one question, if anyone has one. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Anyone have a question? Nope. Okay, great. That's essentially the time up then. So we will be in the Tezos booth just around the corner, all of us. If you wanted to ask any questions of us, please do come along. There is an FX Hash event beginning at 4, I believe. So yeah, do come along for that if you want some free champagne, at the very least. So yeah, thank you for the panelists, to Tyler, to Ivona, and to Disc Collective, especially because it's so late in Istanbul. Thank you for that. Go to sleep. Have a nice sleep. And thank you to all you guys for coming, and thanks for the excellent questions. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Serpentine. How you doing? Hello, can you hear me? I can. Can you hear me? Hey, can you hear me? How you doing? So people can see me actually. Hey, I think you can't hear me because of the music around you. I can hear you, but there's a lot of music around you. Maybe that's why you can't hear me. I can hear you. Maybe without the music, you'll be able to hear me. Hey, can you hear me now? Hello? Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me? Hey, now you can hear me. All right.
the series of events was a lot yesterday. It was like the peak of Basel, I felt. So much. Yeah. You, did you come to ICA? I didn't. Oh no, yeah, you probably had some.
Our mic's on.
Hey, I think we're good to go. We have a green light. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us this afternoon at Art Basel in Miami for what is the second of the Tezos series of talks over the next 2 days. I'm really thrilled to be here with Chanel and Mo. We're going to start with a little round of introductions. Oh, and I should say, we also have Giuliano, who is joining us digitally. Hey, Giuliano.
Hi, how's it going?
We have you by audio. This is good. I can see you. Oh, you're there. Cool. So I'll start off. I'm Holly Wood. I'm the CEO and founder of Hollywood Labs. We're a Web3 advisory agency. I've been working with the team at Tezos probably for the last almost 2 years, formerly when I was in my role at Rarible as head of artist relationships. So I have a kind of a long connection with this specific blockchain. So I'm excited to talk about that kind of topic, about how blockchain and Tezos in particular and NFTs are kind of like doing good, or can do good, or can be a catalyst for change in the world. So Chanel, would you do a really quick intro?
Hello, my name is Chanel Verdolt. I'm the head of curation at Unicorn DAO. It's a DAO that is co-founded by Pussy Riot. And what we do is we're a collector's DAO that focuses on women, non-binary, and queer art to build a museum and collection of the future, and making sure that the diversity is much more equal than what we're currently seeing in the traditional art world and crypto art space, which in 2021, Art Tactic said that only 5% of art sales and acquisition of collections were female. And so we're definitely trying to continue to raise this percentile.
Thank you. Mo.
And my name is Mo Gonam. I'm the founder of Arts Help. Arts Help is a not-for-profit, and we're a digital community of 20 million people around the world, spread across 225 social media channels. We also publish content through our editorial and also through billboards. So we're distributed in 140 markets in the USA, Canada, parts of Africa, the Middle East. And we really like to look at art as a catalyst for social change. So in partnership with the United Nations, we have adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Who here is familiar with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, so we've got a couple of people. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals were developed by the UN in everything ranging from climate change to no poverty, good health and education for everybody, and achieving those goals by 2030. So we really like to look at projects and how art can be a catalyst for change and achieve these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In 2021, we launched our biggest initiative. It was called Conscious Crypto Creator, and it's a $3.5 million artist grant to help them use their NFTs, projects, and digital art for climate change.
Amazing, thank you. And Giuliano.
Hi, my name is Juliano Salgado. I am a filmmaker. I was nominated for an Oscar in 2015, but I'm here today as the vice president of the board of the Instituto Terra in Brazil. The Instituto Terra is a NGO that restore forests, tropical forests in Brazil. We have restored about 700 hectares so far. We are planting this year 220,000 trees. We'll be planting another 600,000 next year, and about 1 million here on from our, in about 2 years' time onwards. What we're doing now, the program we started this year, is actually a double program. One of them is to take our forest, that's 700 hectares, and augment it to 5,700 hectares, which is a massive area. This represents about 15 million trees to be planted in the next 5 years. And we are also starting now another program that's very ambitious, that will transform the way we raise cattle in a region that's about the size of the state of New York. And we have this program that will come to maturity in about 5 years' time. And the idea of this program, the effect it will have on society, is that it will not only demonstrate that you can actually raise cattle under the shadow of trees, but it will prove that this is the most rational, economical way of doing it. And the way we are calculating it is that in about 5 years' time, this will be the most rational way, proven rational way of raising cattle in this region. And from 5 to 10 years, we'll be able to reverse the effects of global change in our region. And those effects are very simple. It's raining about 50% of what it used to rain only 10 years ago. There's a desert starting to expand about 150 kilometers away from us. And so our work is not only urgent, it's not only happening in a place that's actually in a process of desertifying, but it's also going to maybe the only initiative that I've heard of. Of course, it's not the only one, but it's one of the very few initiatives that is proposing to reverse climate change by creating value for the people that work with cattle, augmenting the value of their cattle, the value of their lands, the amount of cattle they can produce. And we will start to associate agriculture with reforestation instead of the opposite. So it's quite a revolution we're starting in Brazil. And I'm very proud to be able to present this to you today.
And so talking on the point of revolution, and we're going to talk quite a bit about climate because, of course, we're here with Tezos. But because we're at and probably one of the most well-known art fairs globally, Chanel, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about discourse and conversation. I know you had an incredible event yesterday. Will you tell us a little bit about that? Because I'm really interested in the idea about how discourse, conversation really kind of helps move blockchain forward, and how important that is for digital artists. I'm sort of reluctant to call them Web3 artists, digital artists, talking to contemporary artists, this kind of like conversation between them, and how kind of like blockchain can like support that conversation. Or tell us a bit more about the event yesterday though.
Definitely. I mean, first and foremost, Tezos and their whole ecosystem just really is so sound with us because of the Clean NFT initiative. And that's so important in Web3 and the digital revolution. But a bit about last night is we had such a magical event with 2 feminist queer icons, Judy Chicago and Nadia Tolikonikova of Pussy Riot. And it was at ICA for Art Basel, celebrating this coalescence and emergence of a full circle moment of Judy Chicago, who's been fighting the good fight for, various decades that I can list on my hands, and also Nadia, who has been so rigorous in her efforts of making sure that we're paying attention to a series of events that are unfolding right now before our eyes, almost like an avalanche. And, providing these feminist manifestos that Judy Chicago actually constructed on tapestries with Dior. And Maria Grazia Ciuri, the director and creative director of Dior, that is the first actually to be a woman to design and creative direct Dior, which is quite a loud statement. And so Judy and Maria were heavily inspired by making What If Women Ruled the World? And Nadia and Judy got together and created a series of 12 questions about wombs, about abortion rights, about being a woman, about what if men and women were equal, and so on and so forth. And so last night we celebrated a panel discussion and kind of an emergence of taking note of they are almost like spiritual art twin flames. Nadia is most known for overthrowing an Orthodox Russian church and about 10 years ago, and Vladimir Putin throwing her in jail because of what she did with her feminist performance art group. And Judy also doing many different series of performance art installations of 4 cheerleaders with the words cunt all over the shirts, like a varsity jacket, and Nadia having 4 of her Russian performance artist mates also completely in the same juxtaposition of this installation, but it's a 50-year difference. And so kind of just, observing and celebrating that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, that women supporting women, non-binary, queer creators are here for each other, but we need to continue to educate the world that there is no difference between gender, and that we need to move forward with all being equal and distilling these values in not only art, but just everyday interactions. And so social justice is just an implementation for evolution of, I think, of our subconscious and the way that we treat others and see the world.
And I was going to say, in terms of like women using their bodies as their actual work, it's super interesting because you have people like artists like Marina Abramovic, who minted her first piece of work on Tezos very recently. It's an incredible series of work. I know that was kind of like a seminal piece. And then literally I was walking up here and I saw a Barbara Kruger piece. So that kind of like tradition, for me, like it's the way that blockchain can give voice to other artists using their form and their expression in whatever way that might manifest. We talk quite a lot about Tezos being like low barrier to entry, and so yeah, I'm excited about seeing more artists, more female artists expressing themselves or using blockchain. I guess the question for us in the room, or people in the space, is how we create kind of like platforms to be able to showcase that work, and I guess that's where kind of like curation comes in.
Entirely, and I think that we're not only giving voice but allegiance to emerging and established artists, and that people like Marina or Judy or Jenny Holzer that have all worked with Nadia and Unicorn DAO know that we are this generation and the next generation that is making it okay to do what we want and bend the rules, so that actually we're shaping something that continues to evolve and grow as a feminist collective. And, Marina going with Tezos and working with Circa in London with Joseph was a clear example of her value system, that she wanted to work with this ecosystem on the blockchain, but do it quite intentionally. Same with Judy and Jenny Holzer. I mean, having these installations with Nadia from Pussy Riot is something that they see in her and Nadia sees in them. And Unicorn DAO is the catalyst for this social change and action.
I think one of the things that I want to touch on also with Tezos is they've done such a tremendous job at providing solutions for platforms like us who have millions and millions of creators within our community. So one of the first projects that we partnered with Tezos on was actually providing a white label solution for other corporations that were looking to enter into the NFT space. So we were able to build a platform. It's actually called Platforms, PLTFRMS. And essentially it enables any company who wants to curate art, feature NFTs, to be able to go in and create their own storefront. And it was just such an easy to use platform, and it enabled us to actually make a decision fairly quick, because we spent years being very cautious about the education side and learning and teaching our community about NFTs, because it is it is so new and it's still evolving. I feel like almost every day there's something new to learn, and we kind of took a back seat. Rather than trying to monetize, we took the approach of how do we educate? How do we help our community in this space and excel in this space? So working with Tezos, I found that that barrier to entry has been really great, and we found that our community and beyond, even in the private sector, they've been getting really excited about being in this space sustainably, because when we first started, we were really focused in on the difference between proof of stake and proof of work. It was a big conversation, and a lot of people didn't really understand the difference, and they were getting into this space, and they weren't even familiar with the environmental impacts of their work. And there was a lot of conversation in the early days about artists finding out once it's a little too late. So I think what's been really great to see is just the accessibility, and that barrier to entry has been made so accessible now just through some of the resources and the technology that Arts Help has been able to use, and just the feedback that we've received from our creator community. It's made a huge impact. So I think, as we talk about climate change and as we talk about environmental impacts and how NFTs can make the world a better place, I think accessibility and education, those are all key elements that, events like this and talks, panels like this really help, people who are here today wanting to learn more and engage in the space, and especially people who are trying to have a movement, trying to push forward a movement.
And actually that leads me to Giuliano. Will you tell us a little bit about how NFTs and blockchain has formed part of your project? Because obviously the project existed way before kind of like Web3 was kind of like a thing.
Yes, the way we have thought about the way we think the NFT solution is not exactly a solution in itself, right? For us, the real issue is how we can. We are located in Brazil, right? So we are doing this work that we feel is very, very important, not only for the region we are in, but for the whole world. And one of the issues we have is that we have a big difficulty to find support from the government. Our government, everybody knows about it, has been for the last 4 years. A government that had an aversion that was the enemy of ecology, right? And so we couldn't count on them. The local state governments are very difficult to work with. And we exist for the last 24 years. We have a forest that has grown completely, and that we planted 24 years ago. So we have a full work, but we've never been able to count on public money, investments. And this is all, it's not that expensive, but we need money to grow trees, to plant trees, to convince people that they will be better off growing whatever culture they do, whether it's cattle, coffee, or cocoa, under the shadow of trees. With water, we bring water back. We're capable of planting trees that will bring water back. And so there is a whole lot of beneficial issues and beneficial, what we do brings a lot of benefits to the community in which we are inserted, but we have big difficulties to find support. So we thought of the NFT as a way of reaching out to a community of people around the world that will be able to support us. Of course, we have monetized it, but not very much. The idea is not monetization either. The idea is that we can have many voices that will be able to bring our programs, what we do, and reach out, to a community that is meant to be as large as possible. And I think our program is very strong. It's urgent. It's quite unique. And but the fact we are located in the interior of Brazil, that we don't have the support of our local, government, state government, federal government, makes it very difficult for us to be able to transform, this environment. And we need to transform it. And we know there is a huge amount of people that is looking out, and it's looking out for initiatives like ours that will be able to not only raise awareness and consciousness, but is actually offering a solution that will not only make the life of the people in our region better, it will actually, it's a solution to actually bring rain back, to bring water back, to invert the changes, the terrible changes that are being provoked by global warmth, global change, climate change. So we need to reach out to this community. We felt young people, when I say young people, and I'm betraying my age, I'm thinking 35 years old down, right? So not so young, maybe, you know, the people that are, you know, in the, you guys could be, you know, our supporters, maybe, if you want to, that would be amazing, you know, to be able to count with you. But we're looking out for people that are ready to join us and to support us. And we thought the NFT is exactly the right media to do it.
Can I just ask, what kind of support are you looking for when you say you're not getting government support, and what is that support that you're seeking for your project?
So what we of course, we look for money in order to be able to implement our programs, but what we do is not that expensive. So we actually look for public support. We look for people that will, the way we think it is that when someone lives in a big city and wants to make a change, you know, in the climate, a lot of the time this person can only make very minor changes. You still have to buy food in the same grocery shop. You can try to select your products better, but the change you can make only goes, you know, in the margins. And so we think a lot of people are looking for a way to delegate their power of transformation. And we carry a massive power of transformation, but we haven't reached out to enough people yet. So as soon as we start having a community that supports us in social media, that join us into thinking, you know, some of our projects, some of our programs, we are opening up, you know, to be able to have a direct communication with this community. We feel that as soon as this narrative, this true narrative, right? When we speak about narrative, a lot of the time we're speaking about fantasy narrative, but this is something that's happening 25 years, that started happening 25 years ago. So it's real. As soon as this reality starts reaching out to more people, we'll be able to pressure our governments, to pressure whatever agency is there to finance the kind of program that we propose, and we'll be able to augment our power of transformation. So this is what we're looking for at the moment with NFTs.
I think that's really interesting. You touched on the point of community. And of course, you know, people are the source of change. I'm a firm believer in that. And so I was going to ask you, Chanel, about the DAO. Obviously, it's very community-driven. Will you talk to us a little bit more about the Unicorn DAO community?
Of course. So Unicorn DAO right now is a collector's DAO. In order to be a member, you have to acquire a seat. And this is directly reinvested in the DAO. So if you perhaps become a member at 50 ETH, it's because you're buying the future of women, queer, and non-binary art to build this vault, this collection that is so crucial to the ecosystem, especially because so much of the space, you know, we got posted in Gagosian Quarterly, and Nadia made a really amazing cheeky statement saying that it's very crypto bro focused. And, you know, when I first met Nadia from Pussy Riot, I actually rescued her from the Bored Ape Yacht Club line in NFT NYC, and she said, "What the hell am I doing here?" I said, "Yeah, what are you doing here?" But it was with a project that I previously worked with, not the Bored Apes, but someone else in a gallery. And we both promised each other that we would never arrive to this point ever again, because it was just so, you know, it was just so against our values of there's not equality in the space, and we have to work every day, all the time at building this community. But just like meeting women like you and all the amazing non-binary, queer, and female creators in the space, the more that we really have this chain link reaction, the stronger that it gets. But we do need to talk about it, because it is an elephant in the room, and until we talk about it, nothing is going to progress. So I think that just being able to really speak about diversity and making sure that things are more equal is super important. And on the other hand, I mean, we have this feminist manifesto that we're building, but also art and activism is so central, and it's a very balanced scale. And so just an example of building community is building community in the moment when it's the most important. And I think some of the greatest success that we've had is Nadia and John Caldwell, our co-founders, have done very, very beautiful, fast work at responding to the war in Ukraine, raising almost $7 million by deploying a multi-sig Ukraine DAO.eth, creating a mintable Ukrainian flag, and making sure that the funds are directly sent to the country, because we knew that their bank accounts were completely shut down. They were being completely silenced in so many different ways of trying to support their family, their loved ones, anything. And
that was set up really very quickly,
it was
right?
set up in minutes. And they raised $7 million in less than a week. And after that, 6 months later, Roe versus Wade was overturned. And that was a very painful day for us, with abortion and everything. Starting legalabortion.eth raised, 6 figures in a week as well. And so creating these different multi-sig wallets so that we can invest in Ukraine or Planned Parenthood is so important. And so we're continuing to do this work. But I think it really woke the world up of like, wow, whoa, there's this different ecosystem that people are supporting. And because the internet is so forthright and we're using social media and activism for a catalyst of change, just like Tezos with the environment and clean NFTs, we're able to create things so much faster than we did before.
And I think that's what I'm really enjoying seeing, is these collective of artists or creators or activists coming together in these communities that they form themselves. It's totally organic.
I think it's so interesting because when artists get behind something, the world pays attention. When you think about some of the biggest movements like Black Lives Matter, it could have never been the galvanizing movement without the anthemic music, the incredible photography, and just the large-scale, block-sized murals that captivated and united the world. And in a similar way, large-scale artworks in the earliest days of the Ukraine invasion helped unite the world against Russia. And I was part of a documentary where on October 10th, we took a train from Poland into Kyiv, and that was the day that Ukraine was attacked. And our train continued to ride into Kyiv. And the reason why we were there to profile artists of Ukraine that were using their artwork to fight and help rebuild their country. So as we got into Ukraine, we went directly into a bomb shelter. And I spent the next 7 to 10 days there. And every time we'd be on set profiling and working with some of the artists, we'd have to stop everything and find a bomb shelter. And it felt like it was nearly impossible to actually continue the work because we spent more times in bomb shelters than we did actually with the artists. And I had to ask every single artist as part of this documentary, how are you paying for your flats? How are you paying for your studios? And it was through NFTs. Every single artist, whether they were a graffiti, whether they were an illustrator, a fashion designer, they were all using NFTs as a way of survival to pay for their livelihood, their families, and to basically continue to do what they do. And when you talk about the DAO and you talk about its impact and artists coming together and community and building community, I think that is so important. And we have a lot of power when we unite and get behind a cause. And it's so interesting, this is like a month and a half ago, and I'm still in contact with all of our cast members for this documentary. And they're constantly using their artwork and their NFTs to continue to push it out. And right now it's been so challenging because of the power outages, lack of resources, but through social media and digital media, they've been able to have support from other artists and other people from around the world that are continuing to push their projects out. So it really has, I saw it firsthand when you talk about, you know, the impact and being on ground. It is the reason why a lot of these artists and creative communities is still alive and being able to do what they do.
That's incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing that experience with us. Juliana, I was going to talk to you a little bit about legacy. Obviously, lots of artists really strive to create legacy with their work. And obviously what you're doing, you know, the outcomes, I was so impressed that you're actually seeing results already, and that, you know, you're talking about 5 to 10 years. This is not a long kind of period of time to be able to actually see the change that you're making. Do you kind of like consider how working with the blockchain, for instance, supports that kind of like legacy story? Does that come into play at all for you guys?
To be quite honest with you, we are at the starting of this adventure. So we have made a drop of NFTs end of September, about 5,000 NFTs. We have now a community of about 3,000 people, and we feel this is, for us, it's a great success. And what we're building is really a long-term project. When you speak about restoration of ecosystem in Brazil, you're not only speaking about planting trees, but you're speaking about restoring economies. You're speaking about bringing dignity for a lot of people that have very, very small lands, that have a big difficulty to survive on those, you know, desertifying places. We're speaking about reinforcing democracy through developing all sorts of educational program related with the general issues related with democracy issues, but also trying to, through social media, but also through philosophy courses. It sounds, you know, maybe very, you know, out far, but actually we are managing to create a consciousness where there was no consciousness of how powerful citizens can become when they actually start sharing their views and understanding the world in which they are inserted. And so this is all work that come with a restoration. So it's not only a restoration of, you know, of trees, of ecosystem, an ecosystemic restoration. It's also a way of restoring the concepts of citizenship and the idea that everyone can think itself in order to be a complete citizen and to understand the society that they are inserted in. And we really feel, but it's an intuition, we haven't been able to test it yet and to make it work and to see how this is going to work and what sort of dynamic this is going to bring to us. But we feel that those communities that are, and listening to you, you know, I'm even more convinced of that. We feel that those communities that use the NFTs as a way of exchanging, a way of communicating, a way of surviving, those communities are the communities that we want to reach out. That they are the communities that will, you know, be touched by what we do, that will feel, you know, the same call as we feel, you know, the need for transformation and the idea that we need to do more than what's been doing, and we need to find each other in order to support each other, in order to be able to promote those big changes, those very important changes. I feel that the way our societies have been going so far somehow brought us to an impasse. We need to think social media, we need to think the internet in a way that's proactive, that will be able to transport the values that we defend, you know, to a broader number of people. And we need to be able to connect with each other in order to be able to make a difference. If I'm isolated in Brazil, in the state of Minas Gerais, I can do so much, I can only do so much. And so I have a great feeling that this is the way to communicate with intellectuals, with artists, with all sorts of people that are fighting with very important issues and issues that connect and that echoes, with the issues that we're fighting for. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. And it kind of like makes me think about societal change. And one of the great things that obviously in Web3 is that like it's largely born from cryptocurrencies. One of the strengths for me is that they're borderless. And I think we touched on that a little bit. But it also means that it has greater opportunity for global impact, I think. Have you kind of noticed in terms of the work that you do as a curator, Chanel, how you're working with artists from kind of like further afield that maybe you wouldn't have been aware of before?
I mean, I come from the traditional art world my whole life, and so, it's kind of like a full circle moment again, except that we're really deconstructing everything that was once quote-unquote proper, and the only way through hierarchies, through a certain system and opportunity that you either get or you don't. And I think that crypto completely decentralizes it at its core to be able to, people like us, the way that I curate, know that I'm going against the grain and that I'm really lucky that I work with someone like Nadia and John, the co-founders, that let me do what I want, because they know that if I do what I want, it's going to be actually making a difference in giving artists a more fair and equal opportunity. I mean, we could spend the rest of our whole lives finding creative talent every single second of our day. And there are so many talented artists that just need one chance to break through to this barrier, and so what we're doing is taking not only the artists in crypto, but the artists in the traditional art world and the artists that we just discover on our radar in that moment, and we all vote as a DAO to either foster or collect or, even give them pointers, like anyone from Marina Abramovich to an artist coming from the traditional art world, going into crypto or needing to be onboarded into tokenizing their collection. We're here to do anything and everything just out of love in making sure that they're set up for success and that they feel supported. And every single artist that we've worked with has told us from the very beginning of taking a call with us that it's just so different, that they do feel like this has never happened in their entire career, which is just a really beautiful feather in our cap. I think it's a mutual relationship to have and be feeling appreciated and appreciate the work, because when you have those sides of the spectrum be equal, it's just a better input and output of having like this feedback loop. As my dear friend in the audience, Sasha Stiles, and Connie Bakshi has said, the work that they do in AI it's not input and outputs, it's more of a loop. And I think that we do have an infinity of caring for the artist and supporting the artist in our network of Unicorn DAO.
And then Mo, you really do work with such a huge range of artists. Are they all visual artists?
No, so we define art as more than just a painting on the wall. So we celebrate music, illustration, video, you name it. So we've seen all types of artists try to NFT and get into this space. And it's been really interesting working with them. And we take a very similar approach to you, where we really try to be as hands-on as possible and create as much utility as possible. So we've launched things like an NFT creator app on the mobile. And we've had over 300,000 people download it. And it's actually not branded Arts Help. It's just called NFT App Creator, and you go in and you create and design your NFT, and it teaches you how to mint your work. It gives you utility and tools to draw and create your NFT. So we also created a series of mini masterclasses that are digital, and you can just go in and go through these mini masterclasses and learn everything about crypto and blockchain 101, environmental impacts, how to get into this space. So we try to keep it neutral. We try to provide as much resources as possible. I think it is really important. So we don't try to push out like a platform that's ours. We try to push out, and guide the artist into the right direction of success when it comes to entering in this space. So it is really interesting because we've even seen writers that will reach out to us and say, hey, I'm a journalist. How do I NFT my work that I'm writing? And it's really cool just being able to navigate that through with them. And it's taught us a lot, and it's made us grow our team tremendously to keep up. But we found that utility is a really great way of being able to reach so many different artists, whether it's through apps or it's through the mini masterclasses that we launched. But yeah, it is really interesting. We work with all types of artists.
And Juliana, we're going to start wrapping up fairly soon. But I just wanted to ask you before we go, it's almost 2023. We are now in December, although this is always so odd when you're in Miami and it's very, very warm here. But 2023, Juliana, are there things, obviously your project is very long term, in the next kind of 12 months, what's going to be the focus for you?
So we are planting right now. This is a rainy season for us. We're planting 220,000 trees. We'll be planting another 600,000 next year. We are planning to launch another NFT, and this time, the fact that someone spoke about decentralization, I think that's very important. And we, as soon as we consolidate our community, we want to start launching NFTs that are not art-related. The first that we launched, we used photographies of Sebastião Salgado, the photographer. And we are planning to launch actually part of restoration, part of a new grown forest, a forest that will be planted with the support of our community. So this is what we're looking for next year. Keep doing the work that we're doing and try to expand reaching out to a community of people that actually share our values.
Thank you. And Chanel, 2023, what are you going to grow? What are you going to break? What are you going to disrupt? I'm hoping there's going to be an exhibition at some point, a physical show.
We're always breaking and disrupting as much as we can all the time, so there's the answer to that. But in 2023, I think you're going to see the collection grow in numbers more than we have. And we're going to be fostering many things to come that I can't give alpha about, but you will see exhibitions that take place internationally. And Art Basel is just the tip of the iceberg to have, Nadia and Judia come together, supporting Marina in her project of Calling Upon Heroes, Jenny Holzer and Nadia doing the public installation in New York, and just growing the collection so that we can continue to diversify the gap, which is so important because it's still very, very low. And so, case in point, we just need to keep on really fighting the good fight. And it's not going to happen in a year. It's probably going to see more of a social change in 5 to 10 years.
And it's not going to happen quietly.
Never, never. I mean, coming from the co-founder that's a riot girl and myself, it's going to be loud, but we're going to do it proper.
We'll be there. And Mo?
For us, it's really just about empowering our community. We launched with $3.5 million in artist grants, and now we're actually starting to see the work from the artists that received the grants come to life. So we're really excited about 2023 being that big year where we can use our distribution model to really elevate those projects. They're all, purpose-led, impact-based climate action projects. And then our goal is to really just build out more utility and resources. As we continue to evolve in this industry, there's a lot more room for education and being able to provide that to our creator economy.
Amazing, thank you. That just leaves it for me to say thank you so much to our guests.
What about you? What's 2023?
2023 for me? It's already shaping up to be a very busy Q1. I'm the same as Chanel. Probably can't say too much, but there's a lot happening. I work a lot on the brand partnership side, so I'm working with some really nice partners for next year. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. I'm particularly excited about NFT Paris coming up in February. That's going to be our next stop to see I think that it's going to be another moment in the calendar. So that was why I was asking about like an exhibition program, because I can kind of like already foresee Unicorn DAO popping up.
Entirely, and I mean, you foster artists and brands from the start too, which is very maternal, you know, but it's much needed. And I imagine we're going to talk after of what your plans are, so I'm super excited for the alpha.
I have never thought of it like that. I like that. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you to Tezos, thank you to Art Basel. But we're going to stick around. We didn't take questions because we're going to be here. Come chat with us. This is one of the things you'll find about Web3 space and artists, collectors, curators in the space. The sharing is very real. So please do come chat with us after if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I'm Hans-Ulrich Obrist, I'm the Artistic Director of Serpentine. And together with me today we have our esteemed artists, the amazing artists Itzel Yard and Jakob Krutz-Dienst. And please give them a very big round of applause. A very warm welcome. And before we begin, I want to thank also the Tezos community, in particular the co-founders, Kathleen and Arthur Breitman. A big round of applause to them. And of course, Tezos, along with Serpentine, are committed to actually enrich creative knowledge within the blockchain space. And it is really this conversation that celebrates the mutual mission. This is our second year together, where we bring together important voices from the blockchain ecosystem. It's very, very exciting for me today to co-host this conversation. I want to acknowledge here the Dream Team, the Serpentine Dream Team, our CEO, Bettina Korek, Kay Watson, Head of Arts and Technologies, R&D, Strategic Lead, Victoria Ivanova, Curator, Eva Jäger, Commissions Curator, Tamara Clark-Brown, who is here. Bettina Korek also is here in Miami, as well as Associate Producer, Rosie McVeigh, and Producer, Alex Boyce. A big round of applause. Finally, thank you to our artists for joining the conversation. I actually also want to connect this conversation to what we did last year here with Refik Anadol, Amelia Winger-Burskin, and Nancy Baker-Cahill. And it has been really interesting to see latest developments across the blockchain landscape, leaning into more decentralized application, into dynamic production, in particular, of course, generative artworks and audience-focused strategies like proof of attendance protocols. Our own work at the Serpentine celebrates this through projects like our upcoming Artist World, which is built on Tezos with Brazilian artist Gabriel Massan. This is an online commission, it's a game, but it's also going to be an exhibition, so it's going to be mixed reality. There's going to be a physical component, a virtual component, and then, of course, also the latest iteration of Future Art Ecosystem 3, which focuses on decentralized tech. And it's a printed book, because books are urgent, but it is also a file you can download from the Serpentine digitally, together with the previous 2 volumes of FAE. Of course, neither Jacob nor Itzel need an introduction. They are leading artists in experiments with art and technology. Of course, in the 1960s, we had Billy Kluver, who started the experiments in art and technology, EAT, and we at the Serpentine wanted to start NEAT, from EAT to NEAT, new experiments in art and technology. And for us, it's incredibly exciting to have 2 of the main protagonists in this space with us today. Itzel Yard, IX Shells, is an artist I've spoken to before. We had an amazing Zoom conversation a few months ago. It was urgent to reconnect here for the first time with a panel, a leader within the creative code, generative art, and blockchain landscape, who shares our passion for supporting artists as co-founder of the virtual community Creative Code. So important, of course, in IXL's practice, this aspect of collaboration and the generosity also towards the community. Please give IXL's Itzel Yard a very warm welcome, another very warm welcome. Jacob is familiar with both of these projects, actually, the Future Art Ecosystems, and also our work with gaming at the Serpentine by being a contributor. We had also worked with Jacob on a virtual pavilion, as well as also a collaboration with BTS, where we brought together K-pop, art, and technology. Another very warm welcome to Jakob Krutz-Dienst. I now want to begin with the first question, and I also wanted to say from the get-go that please feel comfortable to ask each other questions, and we absolutely can also go off script and talk about anything you feel is important or urgent. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts and insights of where the current blockchain landscape actually sits in terms of NFTs, in terms of decentralized approaches, and perhaps also dynamic application. And also just simply ask you what both of you are working on at this very moment in time.
Yeah, so I worked in, with video game engines for like 15 years, and I'm newer to the blockchain space. But I think what's really interesting for me now is the more background tools rather than the kind of the image or the surface. So in particular, using blockchains for nature conservation or for something like decentralized land ownership, and how to digitize environments and find new ways of collaborating to make them and give access to them, and also work on creating utilities connected to actual environments. So that's where my head is at right now. And the other part is that I have this archive of sounds and textures and different species and plants that I've digitized over the past 10 years as well. And this library now, through blockchain, I'm thinking about making accessible and putting on the blockchain so other people can use and have access to this archive that I created over time. So that's where I'm thinking.
Thank you, Jacob and Itzo.
Now that you mentioned archiving and documenting artwork, I think that's what I've been doing for the past 6-7 years without even knowing about NFTs before or blockchain. I was just researching on myself and what I was creating. And I think I found an opportunity to actually preserve my art, just like a museum may do, or I don't know, an archival process that can last for a long time. So that's why I got interested in NFTs, and also because it's a way to, to fund our own projects, to just have enough time to create, and being able to be free from the things that don't allow us to create art in prolific way. So before I was just doing a lot of generations and working with other people in the community. I'm part of different communities, like the software I use, which is Tezos Designer, which is a large community now. Before, it was very niche. I think it still is. We have a long way for people to get to know generative art as a career, as a process where artists can grow and technology can also grow through experimentation. So that's my interest on blockchain technology, because it can help us preserve this documentation process and the way we create art, which is by evolving and by creating things that weren't there before and extend it to others.
Thank you both so much. And I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit more about this question of the archive, because I think it came up in previous conversations we had, and you both have a very, very big photographic archive on which really all your work is based. And you told me that in your archive there is a lot of nature. There is a lot of photographs of nature, and that's of course also true for Jacob, when you basically document forests and photograph plants. Can you tell us a little bit about this, about how your archives work?
Well, yes, I love photography. I think any moment when I see patterns like shadows or lights that are interesting, I'm trying to capture that. I don't want to lose the moment. Sometimes I stop in the middle of the street and I'm just like, okay, I need to take this. Yeah, before coming here, I was taking photos of this building that was reflecting the clouds, and they look so beautiful. And I think that taught me to see the beauty in everything, even if I'm living in a city, even if it's small like Panama or a big city like Toronto, where I used to live. I think that was a method of finding a safe space within all of the changes, living in a city without my family, just by myself, understanding a new method of a new way of living. Panama is very relaxed. It's the Caribbean, it's hot, and Toronto it's very cold. But it can be very beautiful too in the summer, spring, fall. So I just collected as many memories I could with photography, and I learned how to vend this data and turn it into art through computer science and understanding how different applications and languages and programming work. I think you can see a lot of like these patterns of buildings and nature in my work, even if it's black and white or colorful. It depends on the seasons. I think I was trying to adapt in the physical world, but since I couldn't get out too much, I will just go into my computer and create worlds that will reflect this. But honestly, most of my time was inside my room and the computer, like many of us during the pandemic too.
Yeah, I think this form of personifying the data, and that's what I really like about your work too, and looking at it, like the sense of, because in blockchain in general, the big chains where you have like a big data structure that influences everybody, but then how do you personify that as a human at a more physical, emotional, at a very personal level? So I think that's maybe something we share in that way. Like with my own work, I go to these ecosystems with collaborators and we digitize. It's basically a body moving through a landscape over like 2 months. And through those 2 months, there will be generated an archive of data. And this data then becomes personified in order to turn it into an artwork. So that's what I also really like about your approach to your images and your work. Like, because if you work with something, you know, on a blockchain or using big data structures and generative, this can also become very cold. But then by imbuing this kind of human dimension into it, I think this is a big difference in what I'm fascinated with a lot of artists working in blockchain too, is like a personification of what was before more like colder, separated, large data structures. So I think this is a big change of how to, perceive and access an archive.
Thank you. Another aspect which is important in both of your practices, of course, interdisciplinarity and collaboration. Italy, you've spoken at great length with regard to aggregating kind of technical and also production-based knowledge via online community exchange. So not just focusing on creative outputs, but also the process and following the journey of others, that are involved in that and may inform your own. And of course, Jacob, for you, there is also a very important interdisciplinarity in the practice and exchange with science. Can you both talk a little bit about this fear to go beyond, the sort of attempt to go beyond the fear of pooling knowledge, to sort of find ways of pooling knowledge through collaboration?
Let's do that.
I'm rephrasing that last part, like the field of collaboration.
To go beyond the fear of pooling knowledge, to kind of break down silos and bring practitioners from different fields, together in these online community exchanges you have.
Yes, I think that goes back to nature. At the beginning of NFTs and all of this craze, I think I started comparing it to the way mushrooms or fungi will grow. I'm used to compare my art and like the evolution of humanity to the evolution of, or the connections that mycelium networks create. I think we're in a group and we start growing and helping each other grow. We're also reflecting the natural world. And NFT proved that, like how we can create currencies out of using our imagination. I've read a lot about different theories of what currencies are, a medium of trust. And I think NFTs became a medium of trust between people that were in need, that were kind of desperate, and also at the same time curious. Like there's different kind of peoples in like these communities, but I think what is predominant now is the curiosity, because right now I think things have slowed down and are now functioning at a healthy rhythm. And I think that's what we needed. We needed balance and trying to see what we're building before even enjoying it. I think there's so much more to build, but this will, as long as we keep reflection nature, I think this will keep evolving. It's not gonna stop. It's part of us. That's why I told you the other day, like I think machines are natural. It's just part of us. Like, we didn't create this out of nowhere. There's something, I think there's memories that we unlock with certain processes or experiments we do with our own brain that can bring up these new ideas, and not only the ideas, but the need and the motivation to keep inventing.
And Jacob, and maybe also it would be interesting to hear from you in addition then if you also think that machines are natural.
Yeah, probably everything is natural, I think. It's physical reality in front of us. I don't work so much with like a virtual or real divide in that sense. And with collaboration, it's like, so I started working more in video games and then went into the art world, and now I work with composers, authors, field biologists, natural historians, and bring these groups of people together to create kind of environmental instruments, is how I think about it more and more, like these psychological spaces where people have a very rhythmic, emotional experience psychologically that then through the technology, through the exhibition, in VR or game, but the kind of emotion of that and the psychology of that comes from a natural environment, so outside any of this reality we're in right now. So for me, it's becoming very clear that what I want to do is to bring in sensibilities that are also just how I feel and how I kind of am as an artist, that I also feel in danger of going extinct now. It's not just environment, but it's also, ways of singing, ways of moving, ways of looking, ways of collaborating beyond the technology as well. So for my practice, it's like, how do I get a scientist who spent 30 years of his life looking at a swamp? How do I get him to show something personal about this environment beyond my own vision? This kind of goes beyond any structure and technology, because it becomes, you have to speak, you have to become friends in order to learn from a perspective outside of your own field. So this is where I've kind of put my work. It's at the periphery of different fields, and through different peripheries, something new can happen. So this, to me, is what I find interesting working with technology and art and everything. It's where at the edges of different fields, when they kind of like mix together, rather than being in the center of an existing field. So that's like my philosophy on that.
Thank you both so much. So this is end of part one, the prelude to this conversation. And I want to now kind of focus in the main part of the conversation and that's also the reason why I thought it's so exciting that we can bring you both here together. And we always believe at the Serpentine that panels have to produce reality, and it's about making new introductions. And the two of you had never met, and we saw so many parallels in your practice. We saw it already and could hear it when you both talked about the archive. But another sort of common point is, of course, that you both have this very deep connection to video games, to gaming. And Itzel, you told me that your practice grew out of that. And Jacob, when we met for the first time, you weren't at all working in the art world at that time. You were in the world of actually developing video games. And at the moment, we are working on this game at the Serpentine with Gabriel Massa, and we think it's incredibly fascinating how actually also that space of blockchain and gaming is more and more coming together. And in 2021, 2.8 billion people, that is a third of the world population, have actually played video games, average age kind of mid-30s. And so what is a niche pastime has become one of the biggest phenomena of our time. And in a way, video games are to the 21st century what movies were to the 20th, and maybe novels, no one could say, to the 19th century. Now, it's interesting also to revisit Anna Anthropy's book, The Rise of the Video Game Dynasty, from 2012. This book came out exactly 10 years ago, where Anna Anthropy wrote, what I want from video games is a plurality of voices. I want games to come from a wider set of experiences and present a wider range of perspectives. I can imagine, and the writer says you are invited to imagine with me, so you're all now invited to kind of imagine with Anna Anthropy a world in which digital games are not manufactured for the same small audience, but one in which games are authored by you and me for the benefit of our peers. And we can, of course, see that more and more artists, of course, and there has been a long history where artists bring video games into their practice. We think about Rebecca Allen, artists since the 70s, 80s, have done that. But now we see a moment where artists kind of inventing their own games. And we can see also with a practice like Sarah Friend, now in Berlin, Sarah has been making site-specific work for platforms and protocols where software is a kind of a sculptural medium, has been working since 2017 with ClickMine, a kind of a pre-CryptoKitties kind of blockchain-based game where players are enabled to mint a token with each of their clicks. So each time a click happens, basically it leads to an NFT. Of course, Sarah Friend has also experimented with NFTs of generosity. So if that NFT isn't given to a friend or to someone else, it just simply disappears from the wallet. So it only exists, if people are generous. And Sarah Friend also talks about that coming together, of blockchain and gaming. So to cut a long story short, I wanted to ask you to tell us about your relationship to video games, how you kind of came to video games, what are kind of your favorite video games, and if you would agree that there is a coming together now of blockchain and video games.
Yeah, I love video games. So for me, it's I started modifying video games as a teenager. So for me, it's just become like a natural medium because that's like 20 years ago. So it's like a natural way of expressing. And what I find really exciting with the project that Serpentine is doing with Gabriel now is this kind of peer-to-peer development, and where a really exciting part of like using the foundational part of blockchain is in like the crediting as well, like that you can track each developer's participation. You could maybe have like a singer, a performer make something for one game, and through blockchain you can start appearing somewhere else, and you can like track it over time. So I think that is tremendously exciting because in traditional game development so that's why I left that world and went more into art world. You are typically working for like one director and designer, and then it's these huge productions, so it's a lot of money at stake and everything. So a few people design it, and then they outsource, and it's kind of like come back and produced. So what's really exciting with Gabriel's work, I think, is this more like dynamic, flattened hierarchy of development, and that seems to be like a prevalent narrative that's going on in blockchain. So I'm extremely excited on the creator side to see how that unfolds, not just on more like a consumer, like a market orientation, but how you can track these developments as well and collaborate openly that way.
Thank you, Jacob. And Lisa?
Oh God. Okay. For me, games are basically life. Literally, they're life. That's the way we learn, we train ourselves to do certain tasks in the real world and behind a computer or a console. And I remember clearly the moment it clicked that I could learn how to multitask by playing games and like making my brain being like different parts at the same time, doing quests, meeting people online, creating friendships, communities, collecting items, having that desire to know more of what was within the game, and just going on levels and also understanding more about myself, having fun while I was doing it. And I think that's the way I've been living life ever since. I think I love learning new things all the time. Sometimes I feel like I still have that sponge response to like new things that are interesting to me. For example, I learned how to drive recently, like 3 months ago, and I'm like supposedly a good driver. I'm good. I think I'm good. And that's the same thing with NFTs. I learned by watching other people and understanding repetition and how we are living in a constant programming running in the background of like social media, like Twitter or Instagram or other types of social media. And social media also exists inside games. Like, for example, there's a game called Tibia, which is like one of the first MMOs. It's an 8-bit game with like really poor graphics, but it's difficult. And it makes you want to be better at it and skill. So we used to gather in this center, in the center of the game, where we have like several banks, and we will put our items in, and we will talk to each other and try to negotiate and exchange things and plan how to go on a quest that only happened every 5 years for one of these big bosses. So I think that trained me to be, in a certain way, someone that can role play and become adaptive. Like, for example, like this past year, I learned how to do things that I wasn't doing before, like being a professional artist, travel and like get to know people and respond to requests and be more responsible in that sense. And before I was just lost in my own world on my computer and sharing art for the love of it. I still do it, but I think right now I have the responsibility of keep taking care of my family. So the change came for me, and that's how it has influenced me for the past years. You mentioned some of my favorite games. So that was Tibia. There's all kind of role-playing games, but I mostly love from like really good graphics. They have to be interesting or they're either 8 beats or really good graphics like Witcher 3 or anything that CD Pret makes is good. Even if it comes with bugs, I think that they're good at fixing these bugs. And I love glitches, so I can live through it. Mostly role-playing.
Thank you. And Jacob, some more of your favorite games, maybe?
Yeah, there's an endless list. I like this game called Apsu. So it's like a game where you go into this underwater world, and the creators were very inspired by like Egyptian temples and mythologies. And what I also really enjoy about that game, and the reason I like working in the art world versus like a gaming world, is I don't think of it as like game as in objective or from, like games, like a board game, but as something you play as like an instrument. So it's like instead of playing to achieve, to overcome goals, to this like rational technology paradigm, I think of it more like playing music. So then it's about rhythm, it's about emotion, it's about learning to be part of something that gives you like feedback, but that feedback doesn't need to be so like point and click or goal oriented, but it can be emotional, it can be extremely psychological. So for me, it's like if I am sort of like this winter, I was like a bit depressed, and then I went to digitize this glacial cave and turn that into a video installation and like an interactive space. So it's like it became like a mental refuge, and it provided like another sensibility for at a very like psychological dimension. And I think games have this absolutely incredible interdisciplinary field going on. So like some of the best composers or musicians, they would now make things for games, or performers, more actors are going into games. But the gaming world still have this paradigm by large of overcoming objectives and so on, where like, in the art world, you can kind of do whatever you want. And that's why I think like at the edge of the art world and games, this is extremely interesting. And likewise, I think there are more games being made that could easily show, like at Serpentine, which is exactly what you're making with Gabriel. So it's like these peripheries right now, I find really, it's like a cultural shift of an expectation of the medium. And I think it's moving away from just being a game in like that goal-oriented way.
One question which came to my mind in relation to games and your work and the connection is a question I often ask artists is about the unrealized project, because we know a lot about architects' unrealized projects because they publish them, and we know almost nothing about artists' unrealized projects, and the scope or range of the unrealized can be wide. Projects can be too big to be realized, too expensive to be realized, too time intense to be realized. Can also be censorship, or importantly, as Doris Lessing always told me, also projects which have been self-censored. No projects we want to do but haven't dared to do yet. So I was very curious in relation to this idea of the inevitability maybe of the world of blockchain and NFT and the world of gaming coming together. If you both have kind of unrealized games, or dreams for games?
Now that you mentioned games that are emotional, I just remember another game that I really like, which is Gris, GRIS, from a developer in Barcelona. The game is about learning how to grieve. It goes through different stages of grief, and like it starts with really gray landscapes, but beautiful, and then it turns into different colors. And it's just something that helped also during the pandemic. Like I played in December, and it was just something that get me going, and also made me get loose and cry, and then come back to my center of like being focused in something, but also releasing all those emotions. And about unrealized dreams, I think often the place I live in Panama, which is a developing country, but it's very centralized. Most of development is in the city of Panama. Everything else is abandoned, basically. Like the family from my father's side come from Colón, which is mostly African American culture, close to Jamaica and Barbados. And it's very abandoned. The city looks horrible. There's no landscape design. I think people just get depressed by looking around. And we do have beautiful beaches and like beautiful, the nature there is almost untouched. So when I think of games and like cities, because I used to study architecture in Toronto, I didn't finish, it was too expensive. But I did sneak into classes from my partner at the time for urban planning, and I was really interested in learning how like this environments around you shapes you as a human. And I think if we bring sort of games to cities that are like this, that they are not used to go to talks like this, they are not used to watch a documentary and try to change their life through that, but maybe through something that can actually stimulate their progress, like a game does. It's fun, and at the same time it teaches you a different reality. Maybe that can start changing a city like that, mixing urban planning with a game in underdeveloped countries. That could be an unrealized dream.
Thank you so much, Jacob.
Yeah, Gris is a really good game, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of unrealized projects. I think I'd like to make a virtual opera, or work with, performers or craftsmen from worlds of expression that are also vanishing, that are not being documented or represented and also going away. Work with that. But in blockchain specifically, I've been thinking of this idea really of working with nature conservation on decentralized land ownership and digitize it and kind of rewild it forever, and find a way of really using the law of and connect it to the smart contracts of blockchains. So like 5,000 people could collectively own a piece of land that can never be touched by a human, but it could be basically turned into a video game, right? Metaverse, like a virtual world, and kind of see if there's something in that field that I find really exciting. And there are different companies and people already working on this, and new ways of rewilding and using like metadata to do like agroforestry, reforestry at scale. So that's something there that's really exciting, but I think the legal part of it right now is still developing. But when that would be ready to do something like that, I think that would be really quite amazing, and work with Nature Conservancy. And actually in Panama, I'm in contact with the amphibious protection kind of agency, and they are trying to turn the golden frog, that's the only 50, that's like, they think there are 50 left in the world in the forest, they're going extinct, and they're trying to turn that frog into a symbol, an icon, and this is sort of something that could be quite interesting on like a blockchain, to turn it into an icon to help the conservancy of the frogs in Panama.
I think that the golden frog is already a symbol in Panama, like orchids and trees, and like we have, Panama means abundance of trees and forests and water. That's our native name, Panama. And I think like we already use the golden frogs. Like there's bars called golden frogs and stuff like that. But yeah, I am aware like it's going extinct. Also, as the iguanas, which are eaten by locals, and they eat even the eggs and turtle eggs. I think it's really important to like spread the word around the world and develop countries that can possibly come help. But I feel like teaching locals how to do it themselves is also important, because we can't depend on the outside world, our whole existence. And that's what's been happening there. Like people comes and plant-based, and like and then they profit out of trying to save a country. But in the meantime, the locals are ignorant of what's going on, and they don't have employment, education, or they don't understand like the technology that's coming in. They're just working for others. I think it's just important to create leadership within locals to, like, if that's going to happen.
Thank you both so much for these great answers. Now, another question which came to my mind this morning, because obviously, you know, it's the 20th anniversary of Art Basel Miami, and I came here 20 years ago, and actually late at night, you know, after a dinner, saw in one of the hotels in Miami sort of kinetic relief by Jesus Rafael Soto, and you know, the late visionary kinetic artist. And I wasn't really aware, you know, I mean, obviously now is art history, and but at that time he was still alive, and also not so present in a way. So I wasn't really aware so much of the history of his work and if he would still be working. So I made a little research online and actually found out that he lived in Paris. And I lived in Paris at the time. So I kind of rang him up and directly went, when I came back to Paris, to his studio. I kind of recorded this long interview about, you know, and obviously he's one of the pioneers of kinetic art, you know, something which I think is relevant also for your work, Itzel, and also for Jakob's work. This idea, no, that an artwork is dynamic, and we can even say, I mean, you both talked a lot about living organisms. You talked about plants, about animals, you talked about, and I think that's one of the biggest changes which is happening with digital art, is that the sort of status of the artwork is changing. I mean, that was when we started the digital project at the Serpentine. I suddenly realized these works are like living organisms. They don't stop with the end of the exhibition. They continue to evolve and change. And it was interesting, Soto in that conversation with me said, you know, kinetic art, the idea is that the artwork is kind of alive, no? And he also referred, you know, to Tanguely's machine. You can look at Tanguely's machine, very low tech, but they're kind of sort of, you know, alive in a way. So I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about that, the sort of almost ontological change there is towards an artwork as a living organism, because that seems to be very present in both of your works, and another reason why we wanted to bring you both together here.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why I really I'm so inspired and love using these video game technologies, because they're malleable media, so you can transform them and change them forever. So when I make work, for example, it's like there are collaborators I work with, and there's a landscape, and it can be video one day, it can be VR the next. And actually with Serpentine, last year for the Artist World project, we took an older work of mine, which is like virtual island. It's like a real thinking island. And I made this 7 years ago. And then we kind of revived the project and turned it into this multiplayer live reading. So then I invited different writers I know to read from their poetry on the virtual island, and then this was live streamed. So what was first like a video work, then it became a VR work, and then it became like a speaking arena during the lockdown. So it like became something different. So this is that's why I really like video games, but also why I've kind of like slowly moving into more like blockchain area, because a lot of it traps the format. There, you know, there are two sides to a sword or a coin or something. You know, it's a eternally stored data package, so that cannot be reworked again once you do something, and it's on chain. But that's what I find the beauty about video games, is that you can eternally edit it. So that's like the, yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, that's a broad topic. I think it needs a lot of research, but I think most of generative art is about simulating our surroundings and physics. For example, like there's a lot of science projects, or for example, let's say NASA will present their new researches with a simulation of what's going on in the universe or what's going on in a satellite, and they have to program it for it to look like it's what's happening in the physical world. And I think combining science and generative art has created these pathways to explore things like blockchain technology, cryptography, and languages that can evolve to help you create dynamic artworks. You know, for example, there's many projects on chain that will change over time using data from the weather or from phases of the moon, or like anything that you can imagine can be turned into data and be used in the programming languages that the blockchain uses, like Solidity. These are programs that I've been trying to learn myself. They're pretty difficult in a way, but it's pretty similar to the other programs we use. It's just a different language. It's something that I'm definitely interested about because I'm always trying to simulate like spaces, like the circle right here, or like the level of light in my head, or I'm not sure like how tall this table is. And if we teach more people how to create generative art, I think like that will spread the curiosity, and it will accelerate the researchers that we already have. Like, I don't think we have enough people in science, or I don't think we have enough people interested in the future. And the more we have, the faster we will get to the point where like all of this research will accelerate, and we will see it sooner than in what we predict right now, like 50 years from now, for example. I think also generative art is like a mirror to what we do, and in a philosophical sense, I think I often see matches of or coincidences in data. Like I'm just scrolling through the feed and I see the same colors in different posts from people from different regions. And that's the algorithm reading this data and putting it together, so we get attracted to this and we don't stop scrolling. And I see it often, and now I see it just walking around, and I start connecting colors that are in a certain room. And that's because these algorithms that we use in this, and the extension of ourselves, which is our phones, it's teaching us how to read data the same way a machine does. And imagine in 10 years from now how we're going to be reading our surroundings. We're going to be almost like cyborgs, right?
Thank you. Jacob?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, for me, the whole thing is I've worked in, so, you know, when I started making virtual worlds, like as a teenager, everything was handcrafted. So over time, there's more generative tools, and they're like different, in video games, design philosophies. So like one philosophy would be called like a total open world. So you develop tools to make things completely generative, but sometimes then you lose like a strong artistic vision. But on the other side, that's like an entry for you to just put whatever of yourself you want within it. So my whole thing is like balancing between generative tools. So each thing I make, like I might have 2,000 photographs of a plant, and then I use a generative, algorithm and tool and AI to turn that into a 3D object. But then after that, by hand, modify that again. So there's like this balance of how far do you go full on a generative algorithm and down that lane, and how far do you have your memories and your original references of the city of your kind of the imprints from reality that you're including into that algorithm, whatever tool it is you're using in that way. So generally speaking, right now I find this to be a very interesting point, like how do you remain in your body or emotional, imaginative, while having generative tools as well. and what parts of being human and in your existence are you continuating? Which ones are you removing from how you sense, talk, speak, share, and so on? So that's how I look at the
I think in the sense of humanity, that's great. I love the topic or the idea of having balance in everything we do. But I'm more so thinking about generative art in a useful way for humanity as a whole, like imagining using these applications or this acceleration of artificial intelligence tools that provide us with support for art or for research to be used for things that are very urgent right now. Like we know climate change, and we know like the many things that we need to take care about right now. So I believe in one sense, I believe in acceleration of the systems and teaching more people how to do it. But on the other, obviously, we have to take care of ourselves and keep balance and don't get lost in these systems because our bodies are still not used to it. I myself fell into that. I was like sitting on the computer for long periods of time, sometimes 16 hours a day, and I almost like I knew that that was affecting my body and that was affecting my sense of self. So I had to step out and like trying to balance it out. But I learned a lot during that time. Learned so much in like 6 months. So I imagine that many people doing that for the next 10 years. I love the concept of music that you used to. I think we can create. I think everything that we do with rhythm we can make it work. That's like a philosophy I believe in too. When I create art, for example, like I can see patterns moving and they have sound, even if they're silent. And I know which beat it's using, and I know how to apply it to different instruments I use in my work. So that should be all a combination of what we do in life, like the same way we walk, the same way we learn. We have just to do it with rhythm.
This is a really great conclusion. It brings me to my very last question. The late Dan Graham always said we can only understand the practice of an artist if we also know what kind of music they are listening to. So my last question is, what kind of music are you listening to, both of you?
Everything. But my favorite artist, actually internet artist, I would say, is Arca right now. This is like a fantastic artist.
You collaborate, no?
We collaborated, yes.
What do you do together?
We created like this immersive instrument called Bal that we showed in Berghain in Berlin. It's like a living. Basically, I created. I think sound is the most interesting space in technology right now. Then it's very underexplored. And together, we made like a living instrument from a swamp, and Arca was singing different verses to it. I think Arca's not only a great musician, but also maybe the most interesting to me internet artist.
I love Arca. She's awesome. They're awesome. I think one of my favorite artists right now is Niels Fram and Hania Rani. Like they both together. It's like if you see a video of Hania Rani playing piano, she doesn't stop. She goes for like 2 hours. And she has 3 pianos around her. And it's the same thing that Niels Fram does. And I think it's an interesting way that their brain works. They are just so, maybe they have so much in their mind, they have the rhythm running, or they're counting notes all the time, and that's the only way to calm it down, to keep playing nonstop until they're tired enough. I just think, I admire that a lot. I watch that to relax and also to understand like the efforts that a musician can do to just live with themselves and their mind running constantly. And I can relate to.
I think we like the same music.
Amazing.
I didn't know, but now we know.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to you all for being here with us. So grateful to the Serpentine CEO, Bettina Korek. And Bettina and I are deeply grateful to Kathleen and Arthur and to Tezos, to the Tezos team. Of course, as I mentioned in the introduction, deeply grateful to the Serpentine's technology team, also to Octavia Stead and Nico Smirnov from the Serpentine who are here with us. And of course, all our thanks go to the amazing Itzel and Jacob. Thank you so much. A big round of applause.